Today, I'm speaking to Kevin Leach, the main director for Sabre Training Advisory Group, a professional military training non-profit working in Ukraine. Their aim is to give Ukrainian defenders the skills to come home alive. Kevin is a Canadian Armed Forces veteran with a long history of working in Ukraine and in military affairs. And many of you will know him from our previous conversations on the channel. Before we jump in, thanks to everyone who is supporting the fundraiser I've got at the moment to come over to Ukraine in the next, ideally next week, to help plan a documentary film project that we're working on. Everyone who's gone on to Patreon, buy my coffee, hugely appreciate that. Without your assistance, literally, these trips and these events that we do on the ground wouldn't happen. So thank you. Kevin, welcome back.
Hey, thank you. It's always good to come on here.
So let's dive into, I think, something that people are very interested about, and this is it's a difficult topic. This is how the so-called attritional warfare works. There's been so much written about Pokrovsk, and yet I get the impression that much of it, let me cut that out. And yet so much of it written by people who I suspect do not have any connections with people on the ground, are not referring to primary sources, do not necessarily have military training. I mean, this includes me. I perhaps speak to a few more people who are tangentially closer to what's going on, but I try not to jump onto every little, there's a few meters here and a few meters there, and it's a failure, and it's this and it's that, and it's going to be strategically catastrophic, and blah 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 blah. It just seems to me that there are some fundamentals that certainly the media don't understand, but actually many commentators don't seem to understand what's going on. From what you're able to talk about, how should we be, creating some distance and looking at what's unfolding in Pokrovsk?
Well, it's really not good. There seems to be it's like everywhere else. It's kind of like this bipolar response. So some people will sit there and say it's somehow a strategic victory for Ukraine because X amount of Russians died taking it. Um, Others will say that yeah, it's a totally dramatic catastrophe. It is, it's the first domino that's falling. Um, it is a defeat. The For a long time, I've been saying that we need to hit our Valley Forge point here in Ukraine, which for people that don't know the reference, it was I forget which winter, but it was one of the winters during the American Revolutionary War when George Washington had to pull his the Continental Army back to a town, or part of it anyway, back to a town called Valley Forge, and just spend the winter retraining everybody. He brought a Prussian officer named von Steuben over, and von Steuben basically redid the training of the Continental Army, and the army that marched out of Valley Forge was very different from the one that marched in, and we need to hit that point because if we look at the loss of Pokrovsk like a Bunker Hill, it's like we can dress it up any way we want. It doesn't turn it from anything but a defeat. Pokrovsk 3 years ago when I was there, roughly 3 years ago, Pokrovsk was like the kind of last safe hub before you went forward to areas to towns like Kurakhova. Kurakhova has been in Russian hands now for I think over a year certainly. We worked there. We slept a night there. That's a fun story. I'll tell you in person, but um, it's a loss, and we should ignore anyone that says it's a victory. Obviously, we should ignore anyone that says it's an absolutely catastrophic, that's it, Ukraine is doomed loss. But it's not one that we can't have five or six more Pokrovsks. We it was a massively important logistics hub, and its loss is going to be felt. Now, what do we? The thing for me, whenever I see situations like this, I ask how could we have prevented it? Better, more power in the hands of local commanders. That's not something that Sabre's ever going to change. The change for that has to come from within Ukraine, and I believe it will. Um, the like better training for the soldiers so that when they're in these positions, they actually have more of an idea of how they can enhance their defensive position. So rather than just going, yep, oh, I guess this is the house that I have to defend, you go, is this building I've been told to defend in the best possible position? Because if it's not, if I've been told to defend an area that's in a very bad position, I, as a leader, am going to make the decision, say this is a squad leader, go down to the lowest level. Fuck that. We're gonna pull, 100 meters back in some other apartment or another building, and we're going to defend that instead because this position I know is bad because I have been taught how a defensive position should be built. Reinforcing the building with whatever you can. If you're putting up sandbags, I mentioned before we started recording things like wire obstacles, things that make it so that the enemy can't really just walk right up to you. And then the other thing too is that, and I bang this drum all the time. I mentioned this in my lecture in Canada. We must stop sort of, I don't know if the word is trivializing, no, minimizing the importance of the infantry. I am sick to my back teeth of hearing about the fucking drone war and the battlefield without soldiers. It's just gonna be drones, drones, drones. No, drones are overemphasized, very badly overemphasized. Drones are an important capability, but the army is the infantry. And that does not change throughout history. That will never, ever, ever change. To talk about personal connections. So a former instructor of ours, her name's Brittany. She's been in the media now, so I think I can go ahead and just mention her name. But anyway, she's a former instructor of ours. She became a tank gunner, and then after a little while, she became a drone operator. Her team was fighting in Pokrovsk. What Someone close to her, one of her best friends, was killed in a firefight with Russian infantry, and he died because there was not enough Ukrainian infantry to protect the drone operators. And I'm not the only one who's talking about this. She's not the only one who's talking about this. The 68th Jaeger Brigade, they said we don't have enough soldiers, we don't have enough infantry. There are there's a huge deficit there, and I I have to attribute part of it to this this attitude of the infantry are obsolete because you hear it all the time. Tanks are obsolete, artillery is obsolete because of drones. We're in 50 years, you're not going to have dedicated drone units. Okay, hear me out when I say this. It's the same reason that 50 years after the First World War, we didn't have dedicated machine gun units. You didn't have a machine gun company. You had machine guns, the technology, the capability integrated into the lowest level. You had light machine gunners in your squad. And so in the future, we're going to have a squad level drone operator. You're going to have a several platoon level drone operators. The squad level drone operator is going to do double duty as a rifleman. I mean, okay, this is the only prognostication I'm ever going to make because this is right in my bailiwick, right in my wheelhouse. Um, you're going to see drones integrated in the way that machine guns were integrated. Now, when you start talking about like theater level and strategic level things that are say above what a company would control, then now you are going to see those dedicated drone units because it is both a new capability but also kind of a new branch of forces. So maybe I will amend my absolute statement earlier there. But the point is that we we need to stop thinking for now, we need to stop thinking about drones as their own special, completely separate thing and start thinking about them as a capability that enables the infantry to do their work. And the work of the infantry, as I am very fond of saying, you would have thought I was an infanteer. I wasn't. But anyway, the role of the infantry is to close with and destroy the enemy and to take and hold territory. That's what they're best at. That's what they do. They need to be enabled in doing that. And so the only way that we're going to stem the tide of territorial losses is by having well-trained infantry that can occupy well-made defensive positions, be enabled by the drone forces to participate in an active defense, which means I'm not just sitting in my trench, right? Every once in a while, when we have the resources to do it, our drone forces go forward. They pummel the enemy drone forces and suppress them, like doing something like specifically targeting the local Rubicon forces, which if people don't know is the sort of elite drone operators of the Russian side, and they are very good. So pummel the local Rubicon guys after we find out where they are, and that enables the infantry to go out and raid the Russian side. We see a lot of so it's very funny because I hear people say, "Oh, the drones have made it totally impossible to go forward to the enemy positions." Okay, then how come Ukrainian special forces are doing it all the time? Now, some other people are going to sit there and tell me, "Yeah, Kevin, you don't know how the special forces work." I don't, but what I watch is a video of special forces guys carrying out a totally conventional raid, which is a raid is an attack where you go forward to an enemy position, hit it, and then leave. So you don't stay and consolidate that position. You go in, smash up whatever local objective you have, and then you get the hell out of there. That is a lot of those videos that we see on Russian rear areas are conventional raids. Now, the only people currently with the capability, the level of training, and the available resources to carry out those raids are Ukrainian special forces. However, I am firmly of the belief, because I know it's because I know what's possible, that conventional infantry, properly trained, can do that task. But the properly trained part comes in there. And this is, you know, I'm not shitting on them, but a previous unit that we worked with, I had a platoon commander come up and tell me one time, he was just kind of like lamenting, or no, sorry, company commander. He was lamenting. He says, Kevin, he says, working on the front line is so hard. It's hard to do proactive operations because the most I can get behind enemy lines at any given time is a platoon. And he's saying this as a lament, and I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, oh my God, you can get an entire platoon behind enemy lines. I know what a well-coordinated, well-trained platoon with a proper plan, getting them behind enemy lines, you can cause a massive, massive chaos, way, way larger than the effect that you would have in a sort of traditional like frontal fight. And so it's just a matter of getting that level of institutional knowledge and coordination in there to allow the infantry to really, really unlock their full potential. And when I talk about the potential of Ukrainian infantry, it's nearly unlimited because the what we saw in past training, it's one of the things it's become our a real guiding sort of keystone case study was we had 2 uninterrupted months to work with a company of Ukrainian troops. And we saw them come from a pretty high level relative for people from out of the traditional Ukrainian training system, the pre-2022 Ukrainian training system. We saw them come from that to a level that I would say would exceed that of most NATO forces. And what we saw was that we would give them tools for planning, tools for coordination, and they would use them in ways that we didn't expect. Um, like normally when we're doing the orders process, an officer, say a platoon commander, has come up with his plan. He is now presenting that to his squad leaders, who will then give it to their squads. What we saw is the way that our students did it is the platoon commander would come and deliver it to the entire assembled platoon. And rather than being more of a receiving thing, it was more of a conversation, a discussion. So he would give that, and then the platoon would come back with their questions, come back with their comments, come back with their ideas. That's something that we only, honestly, in my Canadian context, you would really only see that within our special forces or very, very high level infantry like Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry, PPCLI, which is pretty much our best infantry regiment in Canada. I'm very sorry, Jan. No, if he watches it, one of the officers in our team comes from also very good infantry regiment, but PPCLI are sort of the internationally recognized ones. The point is, I'm yammering on a little long there, but Ukrainians, given the tools that we use them in, I think, better ways, and I think a lot of it has to do with like it's just a more open a society that's more open to individual contribution is what I'm going to say, and
And that leads to
that's
innovation. I mean, I think what we're saying here is that
exactly.
can lead to innovation and dialogue, but it's not, it's not all a sort of one-way street. It's all roses and picnics and whatever, because it seems to me that the drone forces are especially popular, especially hyped, because there's a couple of things going on, and this may be simplistic, but it's not just that people want to join them because you're not sitting in a trench, freezing your butt off with shells coming over. I mean, maybe that's a part of it, but some of the drone units tend to be less hierarchical. They tend to be less Soviet. They tend to have better training and equipment. And as you say, there's more openness to dialogue. And of course, that's going to be attractive, especially to younger people who were not brought up in that Soviet mindset. That's not to say that infantry regiments are all, not open to that kind of stuff. As you say, there are ones that are very forward thinking. But overall, is there some truth in this that people can join regiments that give them a better chance to survive, but also a better chance to have an impact? And unfortunately, it's those units that are less Soviet in their mindset, less hierarchical, that give people those opportunities.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, there's no it's not an accident that the units that to go away from drone forces, but the units like Azov, Khartia, Third Army Corps, Third Assault Brigade, the it's not a mistake that they do well in recruiting because they have a much less Soviet way of working. And yeah, the newer the drone forces, because they're newer, there is no Soviet trained officer who has anything to say about drones. And the lack of Soviet contamination in that area is definitely a reason why it's as effective, or why drone operations are as effective as they are relative to like the infantry broadly here. Um, but it's that's just an example for other units to follow, is say, hey, shoot, this practice is working really well for these guys. How can we adapt it to what we're doing? And we are seeing innovation like that across the board out here. It's just not like, and not just in the military, but also obviously in the private sector. I think that gets a lot of attention. Um, so yeah, that makes a lot of sense for at least why why drone units get probably more willing recruits. But what I will say though, you maybe you don't have to sit in a trench, but you're probably going to have to sit in a basement, and you're going to have a cab thrown your way every once in a while, especially if the enemy has been attentive in locating your position. And there's the part is like talking with Brittany, something that she brought up in our, it's like the Sabre sort of casual group chat that we have on Signal. Something that she brought up is that every drone operator it doesn't matter that you're a drone operator. You need to have those basic soldier skills, basic infantry skills to be able to defend your position. Because say you're not even in Pokrovsk, where you're facing regular Russian infantry. Say you've got some really Gucci setup where you're 10 kilometers back. At any time, a Russian special forces team could come in there to try and kill you. And if you don't have your position, if you don't have a defensible position, then you're just frankly you're gambling with your own life. And so these, I say it all the time, and I'm repeating myself even in this interview, but the infantry is the army. And so every person in every army must have a basic understanding of the role of the infantry. And frankly, must be ready to become infantry at any moment, not because they've been cycled into some high attrition unit, but because the enemy chooses when you become infantry. And that's a point that I've been trying to make in a lot of different fora. Uh, you know, you can sit there and be like, oh, hey, I'm just a driver. Oh, hey, I'm just a medic. Oh, hey, I'm just a drone operator. Russians don't give a shit. We've seen I mean, those, there's so many words I'm not allowed to say. Those subhumans in Rusich are advertising that they will reward with cryptocurrency Russians who send in proof of their committing war crimes, of them executing prisoners of war. So, do you think those guys give a fuck if you're just logistics, just this, just that? No, they decide when you're the infantry, and they decide, you know, I don't judge anyone for the actions they take when they're in these situations. I mean, like for example, someone who decides to try and surrender, but I think at this point, I would advise any soldiers just make them kill you while you're fighting, because you don't know what they're going to do once they have you in their power, and maybe they're gonna, maybe they're gonna draw it out.
In fact, we do.
Um,
We have plenty of evidence actually of what that's like, and it can be quick, like the Slava Ukrainian, extraordinary man who was executed. But we also know that it can be very drawn out, very painful, from starvation to torture over months and years. Um, Absolutely. Whereas Russians are told stories about what's going to happen in captivity, and you see interview after interview after interview where they say, this is what we're expecting, and this is how we were treated. We were kept in warm surroundings, given
mhm.
food. Nobody beat us. Right, they didn't beat us like our own guys beat us. It's kind of it's so obvious and it's so horrific. The last question here, and this is one that really sort of draws this together. So the idea here, and this is going to be a challenge, I'm sure, for Western forces as well. If all the drone guys need to understand that they need to flip into the role of infantry and understand the basics, we are perhaps approaching a point where all infantry guys need to be able to perform some functions at least of drone operators. So this needs to become integrated and not just a sort of a specialization that only, techie kind of guys can handle. This is going to be a huge challenge for Western military, surely.
Oh yeah. Just so I really like comparing drones to machine guns, because it's a technology and a brand new capability, just like machine guns were. And so every infantier in NATO, well, okay, I haven't seen every military in NATO. Every infantier in Canada knows how to use our two main machine guns. The C9 light machine gun, which is the FN Mini-Me 5.56 millimeter light machine gun, and the C6 general purpose machine gun, which is a 7.62 by 5.1 millimeter FN mag. Every infantier knows how to use those, because those are the tools of the infantry. And yeah, I think in the future every infantier is going to have to understand at least how to use like a dropper drone. Not necessarily an FPV, it's a different type of piloting, but a stabilized dropper drone or a stabilized ISR drone, or intelligence surveillance and reconnaissance drone. We're talking like Mavics, or whatever future non-Chinese equivalent there is. Um, it is just a necessity. It's now part of the job. This is, you once upon a time it was a spear and short sword and a shield. Now you need to know a machine gun, a rifle, and a drone. Um, and that that transition in NATO could be made easier if NATO was asking people with real knowledge on the ground here to come and teach them. Outside of a handful of units, small units, just a handful that I'm aware of anyway, it's not happening. And in the Canadian case, I don't mind saying we have approached, I won't name the units, but we or people that are working with us who worked with these units previously have approached them and said, would you like Would you like to get some lessons learned from us? Would you like to talk to us about what we're seeing out here? No. So the there's a lot of maturing that has to go on within the world's militaries and governments. Um, NATO has to humble themselves and recognize that yes, you're powerful, wealthy countries, but you don't know everything. And your peer warfare experience is, vintage 1950s. So start fucking picking it up. And on the on the Ukrainian side is to recognize the problems that we have. The Soviet what I Radянske Забруднення is what I would say in Ukrainian, which is um, basically Soviet contamination, you could say.
Hmm.
Uh,
Uh,
that needs to be scraped out. Um, and we're getting there. We're getting there. I think the work of Nabu is really starting to kind of like lead the charge there, at least in not necessarily within the military, but within the government. And it's got to happen.
I mean, this is an area we won't talk about here, but there is the potential for these corruption investigations to poke their noses in all sorts of areas. Yes, it's energy they're focusing on at the moment. We have seen procurement as an area of focus a couple of years ago, but yeah, I think this is the subject for a future conversation. We're going to see all sorts of little nooks and crannies which have escaped largely, the cleansing eye of Nabu and Sabu. Yeah, and it's essential. It's actually essential, isn't it, that we have a far more transparent, far more efficient, less hierarchical, less risk-averse Ukrainian government. And I think the only way that can happen is by bringing more people and more ideas in there. This is a theme I'm going to continue actually with Joe Lindsley, which is this can't also just be confined to the Verkhovna Rada and politicians who, by their very nature, are kind of risk averse and not necessarily experts in certain fields. You need to bring in veterans, you need to bring in civic society leaders, you need to bring in experts from their various fields. But that's another topic, but it's something we're going to be digging in, trying to look at how we cannot that old phrase about not wasting a good scandal or a good crisis. So yes, there's
Mhm.
this horrific corruption scandal, but let's see how Ukrainians are going to be seeing how they can get the best of it, not necessarily, flipping to sort of despair and renting their clothes and wailing like Russians do. They don't want
Yeah,
to
yeah,
react in the way that
yeah.
Russians do.
Very demonstrative whining and then nothing achieved.
That's it. Or
Um,
when their multiple entry Schengen visas are cancelled and they run around, raging in a way that they've never raged about war crimes in Ukraine. Again,
no,
another topic, but
yeah, yeah. Is there? There's one thing I just,
yep.
if possible, I'd like to make a little personal appeal for. So my in-laws, my wife's aunt and uncle, had a house fire, and the roof of their house is pretty much completely destroyed. So I'm doing a totally separate fundraiser. It's nothing to do with Sabre. Just to I'm asking for a maximum of like $75,000. I don't think it'll take that much, but I'm just trying to see what I can do because I don't know how much damage has been done to their home. But if possible, I'd like to just add that appeal, um, maybe even up front in the video so that people can. I'll give you the link too if you don't mind sharing it.
We'll
Um,
pop both of those in the description so people can click through.
Perfect. Yeah, that'll help. And then I'm just going to bother everybody else I know with any social media presence because it's it's awful. Right before winter, their house has no roof, and it's a just two generations living in the three generations now, pardon me, living in the house, and we need to get
Ukrainian
them back.
winters are not kind, they're harsh like Canadian winters. Well, you've got some news, and we're going to talk about all sorts of things. We're going to talk about sort of Pokrovsk. We're going to talk about sort of tactics. We're going to touch upon how I would say remnants of a Soviet mindset may be holding Ukraine back. practically on the ground, but also in the, when you zoom out in the macroscopic view. Before that, though, you've got some interesting news on your training outfit and sort of progress that's been made since we last spoke.
Yes, so I kind of alluded to it before, and it was in the early days when we started negotiating. So I didn't want to jinx anything, and I didn't want to say anything that I wasn't allowed to yet. But we just recently, at the end of last month, signed an agreement with the Third Army Corps, which many people will know was raised from the Third Assault Battalion, Brigade, pardon me. And we have begun training on what will become one of their main training centers. It's in, I'm not going to be specific about where, but it's in the eastern part of Ukraine. Our instructors have been there since the middle of October, so we started working before we had the agreement signed. But I think it was a little bit of a tryout at the start. At any rate, this is huge for us because in now that we're not working alone, not only do we have a hugely influential unit supporting us, but we have the help of their instructor team, which is who we're partnering with most closely, and that's boosted our training output to about 10 times what it would be normally. And because it's Third Army Corps, they've got plenty of candidates for training. So, of course, it's early in the life of this training center. It's early in the lifetime of this partnership, but it's incredibly exciting because this is the highest level agreement that we have ever been a part of, and it is that it's with such an august and respected unit is really, I would say, flattering for us. It's an affirmation that our work is being recognized and valued. And it's one that, as things evolve, I hope to be able to kind of discuss more of what we're doing because the Third Army Corps has incredible ambitions for what they want to do. The Corps leadership are really taking their duties seriously, and their goal, this is definitely something that I can say, their goal is to basically uplift the subordinate brigades that have been put under the Corps' leadership now. And as it was put to me by one of their top training officers, the Corps is going to push out ahead and drag the rest of the Army with them, which in terms of professionalization and standardization of tactics is it's genuinely exciting. And the people that we work alongside with, for example, at the training center, the commander of the training center is probably one of the like he was telling us we were speaking in Ukrainian, and he was kind of telling me he's an idealist, I'll say, and he was telling me his vision for Ukraine in the future, and I'm smiling ear to ear the whole time because it's very close to what I would dream of for Ukraine, and meeting someone like that, meeting a Ukrainian with such a vision and with such optimism is the optimism is infectious. And then his chief of staff, who is a foreigner, is incredibly, like, outrageously competent, and seeing what seeing what she had put together in terms of organizing the training center. So I have one of our instructors is a former British Army major. He was giddy like a little boy, seeing at the instructor briefing, seeing what had been organized, what this chief of staff and the head instructor had been put together. Head instructor is another foreigner as well. Um, he three times ish through the presentation, he was saying to me, or whispering, so as not to interrupt, and he's like, "This is amazing. I'm so excited to see this." Some variation of that, and then he afterwards to each of the senior staff, I think he said once, two or three times how impressed he was and how happy he was to see that, and how it's the most organization that we've ever seen out here. And I mean, this is sincere. what I think we're witnessing is I don't know, evolution of Ukrainian, like indigenous Ukrainian training systems. And that's something I've been banging that drum for a long time, the need to move away from the Soviet stuff. I can say, you know, I only spent a few days personally at the training center last week. I intend to go back. Actually, it's we can bring guests. So I'm just going to put that down. We can bring guests. I was told anyone except journalists. So
I'm
it
not one
might
of
be,
those. No.
yeah, that's it. You're anyway. Long way of saying you're welcome to come, and I'll drive you out there myself, just so I can have an excuse to get out there and spend more time. But everything that I saw was great. I mean, we're in the space of time that we've been working there, I've watched the training process because we were among the first instructors to hit the ground. And the progress in about say 3 weeks is what I have seen take 4 or 5 months working inside of other units, just in terms of like tamping down the chaos and imposing organization on the training because it is, you mentioned that that guy from the cultural forces describing Ukraine as anarchy or anarchism in action, or applied anarchy, pardon me. And that's it's great. It's amazing seeing these self-organizing forces, but sometimes it takes a while to wrangle everybody. And just how quickly the wrangling happened on this new training center is incredibly encouraging because that's about a month. In 6 months' time, I think we're going to see an incredibly well-oiled machine that would be totally recognizable to someone coming from a NATO military, only without all the NATO baggage, without the war on terror training scars, without the sort of bureaucratic limitations, because I've talked about it before, but what we're allowed to do on the training centers out here is like completely out of the imagination of most Western officers.
And
And
incorporating, I
I'm so
guess,
passionate.
sort of drone techniques because there's been a persistent sort of rumbling complaint that Western training has not incorporated not only basics of drone warfare, um, but when they do try to incorporate it, it's entirely unrealistic, and they don't have access to up-to-date electronic warfare and the latest kit that would create a realistic scenario.
That's it. And I mean, there's many reasons for that, which I think I've talked about before, but sort of like legal limitations on where you're allowed to fly drones in given countries. But no, we're able to employ sort of the full spectrum of things here. And in the future, what I'd really like to see is platoon and company level command posts that have that full drone integration. And the reason we want to see that is so that I can get my former officer instructors in there to see how it's all laid out and draw what we can from it, and then start to synthesize that level of Western tactics and Ukrainian experience. So it's all in all very exciting, a big step forward, and it's one of these things that because this is a nice thing for me, is that because I don't need to constantly chase down new partners to work with, new places to work with in order to keep consistent training. I am now freed up to pursue relationships with, pursue relationships, pursue resources. So this year, I've been able to I've gone from basically having almost no official connections in the West to being able to regularly speak to the defense section at the Canadian Embassy, meeting with the EU delegation, meeting with a general from NSATU, which is a NATO body, and that has given me like every time I'm able to do that, I'm able to build a better picture of exactly how everything's working. I'll also take note of the where it's not working, and then that lets me shape Sabre's activities in a direction to kind of, I hope, uh, lubricate some of these processes. I have to later on today. I have to write a message to a NATO liaison officer because I want to bring the at least the chief of staff and the commander of the training center to meet with these liaison officers because one of the things, so NSATU, it's oh God, NATO. I forget what the acronym stands for. NATO Support and Training Ukraine, something along those lines. Support us. Anyway, NSATU, whatever. I want to bring that liaison officer in because one of the things that the general told me when I met with him, first thing I asked him was like, "Do you have funding? Can you fund training inside of Ukraine?" He said, "Nope, we don't provide funding." Okay, great. What we do is deconflict the training inside of NATO and potentially provide training resources to the training inside the country. So my hope is I get the staff of the training center talking to the liaison officer, and then we find out ways that we can get more resources, pardon me, pushed into the training center and future analogs to that training center, which are planned. And that's the beauty of me being able to run around and do that is that I can build these connections that maybe wouldn't be built otherwise. And it's part of the value proposition that I keep flogging with Sabre is that we're able to bridge a lot of gaps because the uh, I mean hell I'm talking to to one of the liaison officers they they can't go out to where that training center is. It's too far away. It's considered to be too dangerous. Well, that's fine. Sabre will go there, and we'll build those bridges for you guys. Um, and yeah, that's kind of the side benefit of this new agreement is that I'm freed up to run around and do this stuff, and I can uh, funding allowing, I can spend more time in Canada trying to build up support there as well. That's actually something later on maybe would be worth talking about as
We
my
should
latest
probably
trip.
mention it now,
Mhm.
in case people don't get to the end of the video, because we know the way, people interact with these. We've got more people's eyeballs here than we will at the end of the video. So you've got this fantastic sort of, stable pipeline, as it were, to be able to deliver the training, and one assumes have far greater impact at far greater scale, which is fantastic. That doesn't necessarily solve your financing issues. So could you talk through, what you're hoping here, what you need, and how, especially anyone who's part of governments and may have access to various assistance programs, how can they help?
Well, yeah, it's in that case, it just comes down to funding. So we've been pursuing funding from the Canadian government. That's kind of an ongoing project of mine. I'm now uh, what I've realized is rather than engage with military personnel because they're not the end decision makers, is I need to start engaging with politicians. So to that end, I had a small trip back to Canada a couple weeks ago now, and I was able to deliver a lecture on the sort of the state of the war, and then especially on training and the effect of good training. That's up on YouTube, not to compete with you, but I'll provide you the link. Anyhow, the ask that I have now is the way I put it is that we've built the machine. I've put together a really good team. I'm proud to say, and I will say I in this case. And this team, what we have done is we've built a machine that runs very well, very efficiently. We just need to put gas in the tank. What that looks like in specific numbers is if I want to stabilize the team, if I want to make the team that's in the country right now sustainable long term, I need about 30,000 US dollars per month. Um, and that 20,000 of that is wages to pay five people 4 grand a month, including myself, which would be nice because I haven't had steady income since 2022, and that sucks. But yeah, the reason is I think there's a lot of people that get angry when you talk about pay and well, you should just do this for the, I don't know, whatever, do it for the cause. And that's, yeah, we've been working that way for 3 years. But if we want sustainability, for example, one of my, well, a number of instructors that have been through here have families, they have kids, and the cause doesn't put clothes on those kids' back. It doesn't put food on the table, and it doesn't ease the stress in a relationship when one of the people in the relationship is unable to contribute decent amount of finances. And so the reality is, like, people need to be paid. Now that said, we're proposing to pay about 40% of the industry standard for this job. And that's because the people who do join us do it for the cause. They're not doing it for the money. So the, you know, and at the end of the day, that cost is still way, way, way lower than it would be with other efforts. Our per student cost, if we go up to like the maximum scale, this is now leaving what I've just said, about $30,000 a month. That's the base level of sustainability for 5 people. To move up to the scale that I'm really looking at long term, we would need about $2 million per year. Now, that $2 million per year would have 20 instructors, 20 interpreters, all the vehicles we need. And that would have a per student cost of about $800, which probably would drop when you consider that you look at the partnership that we're working with now, and how that would look when we have more people in the country. We would frankly be saving even more, because the sort of force multiplication factor of our team would increase several times, because we're working, rather than just all on our own, isolated somewhere, we're working alongside Ukrainian instructor teams. So I haven't done the math on what the per student cost would be. I'll do that when I have a better idea of what the training center output looks like. But the point is that we're drastically lower cost than other training efforts, and it's all done very transparently. So I'm just going to send it out to our donors today, and then sorry, our Q3 donor report, I'm going to send it out to our donors today, and it shows every dollar that we spent, and what it was spent on. And we have kind of an inspiration for that in terms of transparency is Ziga's Pa. I met Irina in person finally, I think it was last week or the week before. Yeah, week before. And awesome. Like, they do an awesome job, and they again, they show that full transparency. So we want to do the same. And that's something that I know these are things that matter to donors. We just need to find the donors who can help us achieve this basic level of sustainability. Because once I'm able to sustainably keep the team paid, because the reality is, we've had a lot of instructors come through here. They're great people. They work 6 months, 7 months, 8 months for free, and then they have the inescapable reality that they've got bills back in their home country. They have a spouse who needs their contribution to the family, and they have to leave, and that leads to discontinuity. And so basically, I need donors' help to keep that continuity in place. We're, to be completely blunt, we can offer tax-deductible donations to Canadians and Americans via our fiscal sponsors. We have some incredible donors who give in the thousands per month. But we're running the organization currently on about 6-7 grand US per month. The sooner I can get it up to that
That's not a
30,000
huge amount
mark.
by any standards, given the
No,
effect that it's having on helping Ukraine towards defense of its territory.
And that's it. I mean, I want to tear my hair out sometimes when I see the way governments, allied governments spend their money, or large organizations spend their money. You know, they'll spend that $2 million on a single helicopter, and it's like that's great. That helicopter is without a doubt going to be helpful, but not, frankly, not as helpful as 2,000 more, or or excuse me, 2,000 the lowest, most conservative estimate for yearly output at full scale. 2,000 more trained soldiers, especially sergeants and junior officers. That one, yeah, one helicopter, one missile does not have the effect that those 2,000 trained troops would. Which I think a lot of people would accuse me of I don't know, like bitterness or jealousy or whatever. It's not the case. It's just that I'm out here. I every day deal with the consequences of the situation out here. And so seeing it twist me up. I want, like, yeah, I would like to have a livelihood again, but more than that, I would like the organization I've built to operate at its fullest potential. And I'd like to see this big, beautiful machine running at the highest capacity that it can. Because if God, for God's sake, if it was about money, I'd go do consulting in the Middle East. I have the experience for it now. Um, I have the industry network that I could probably find that work. Um, I may even be forced to if I can't make a living doing this, which pisses me off. I don't like, to be very blunt, I don't fucking want to do that. I want Sabre to be the job that gets me paid, so that I can focus on it and nothing else. But without, I was told by our uh, director of outreach that we had working with us. I was told to expect governments to be the last ones to sort of get on board. And yeah, my experience with government has been very frustrating so far. And I see that's very good advice. So I guess the alternative is to find private donors. And that means that I gotta be doing sales pitches. I have to be going to the donors, which usually is well, in this case, it's exclusively North America. And I have to find people who are in the at the level of wealth that they can afford to give $1,000 to $5,000 per month. And I don't say that to demean people that can give 100, but it is simply easier to find six people that can give $5,000 than it is to find 30 people, pardon me, 300 people that can give.
Fantastic. Huge pleasure, obviously, speaking again, as always. We'll touch on some of these themes in other conversations. But yeah, for today, Kevin, thank you so much for everything you're doing and your colleagues too, and for coming back on.